Gang's all here. Hey everyone.
Hi.
Welcome to session 2 of our Getting Cheeky with God series, Menstruation and the Mikveh. I'm Alana, she, they.
I'm Madison, she, her.
I'm Jessie, she, her. And I'm Kaylin, she, they.
Amazing. So Mad, do you want to give us a definition for menstruation, since that's what we're chatting about today?
Yes, today we were talking about menstruation and the mikveh. So I wanted to open it up so we were all on the same page about what menstruating is, or having a period is. And menstruation is the part of the menstrual cycle when a person bleeds from their vagina. During menstruation, the lining of the uterus, also known as the endometrial tissue, which has grown after ovulation, breaks down and flows through the cervix and out of the vagina. Very straightforward definition for everyone what menstruation is. I think that when I first heard about why people menstruate, it was like you prepared for a baby and one didn't come. So I appreciate straightforward definitions like this that take away that weird reproductive part of it. Reproductive obligation, I should say.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that's definitely how I heard periods be described as well, which is really interesting.
And then kind of a segue to that too is just we want to start off the conversation by saying periods are not a gendered experience. They're not something that only women experience by any means. There's a movement to reclaim periods and get rid of taboos around them. I think cis women oftentimes try and equate having your period with this wonder of a feminine experience, and that isolates a lot of people from the conversation. People of all genders menstruate, including non-binary people, agender people, and plenty of men. So we just want to get that said right off the bat. I don't think I had anything else to add. Menstruation doesn't change anything about your gender. It's just something that our bodies do.
Yeah, and just thinking about how we were talking about this earlier, among ourselves, but how we use the ability to get pregnant or menstruating to define who is and is not a woman, but that's alienating even for cis women, because there are plenty of cis women who cannot get pregnant, and there are plenty of cis women who, once they hit menopause, are no longer menstruating. And so moving away from defining womanhood by menstruation and pregnancy, because it doesn't work for plenty of cis women, not just because it doesn't work for trans and non-binary folks as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, Kaylin, do you have some period facts for us?
Yeah, so as we discussed, I guess earlier, the biggest myth I feel or fact, I guess, myth/fact is not only women get periods, but they're genderless. Let me pull them up. So one big fact is you can get pregnant on your period, which it is less likely, but it's not impossible. And I feel growing up, that was also a really big thing, was both you were Mad and Alana were saying earlier, how it's, oh, you just didn't get pregnant and that's why you're having your period. I feel that went hand in hand with your body's angry at you for not having a baby. Something I heard a fair amount growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Just people using periods as contraceptive methods, because you can't get pregnant when you're on your period, which is, as we're sharing, not the case.
Some other interesting, I guess, I don't know if they're interesting, they're just facts. Period cycles can range anywhere from 21 to 35 days instead of just the 28-day cycle that everyone is kind of told. And that's still considered your whole menstrual cycle and menstruation. And to me, the difference between your period just being those 3 to 7 days versus your menstruation, which is an ongoing cycle.
Yeah, that's true.
You're always kind of in a stage at some point.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love those memes where it's like the one day a week that you're not like at a point in your menstrual, or the one day a week, the 1 week of the month that you're not actually actively in a menstrual cycle, like ovulating or something like that. And that reframing is so, I don't know, I feel like it's helpful to think about the ways that like hormones
Well, you think about it, and it's like you have like people can have PMS symptoms up to 2 weeks before they start bleeding,
Yeah.
and then some people also have post
mm-hmm.
menstrual symptoms. And so, yeah, you're right. It's literally that meme. Like this one, you're like, oh, so all this stuff was like going on the whole time.
Yeah, and also just like I feel like just acknowledging that like us having an open conversation on a live stream about periods is like pushing back against this taboo of talking about menstruating, like just wanting to normalize that conversation because it is this thing that I feel like it's very like hush hush and you're taught to like not talk to people about your period, and I feel like there's a lot of like shame. I feel like as a young person there's like a lot of shame around like getting your period and like quietly like asking someone for a pad or a tampon if you don't have one, or if you bleed through your pants it's like the biggest deal in the world and it's so shameful, but it's like this is happening to like majority of the population for the most part at least once a month, and like
Yeah.
we're all engaging with it in different ways, and just if we were more open about that maybe we would all have more knowledge on what is like everyone actually experiencing, because we were talking about like experiencing period pain and how like Kaylin shared like they didn't even realize that periods like weren't supposed to be painful because like we were never like talking about it. And so what is the reality for people who experience like extreme like pain around their period, or for people who have PMDD, which is like depression associated with their period, which I feel like is something we like never talk about, and things like PMDD and endometritis, is that how you say it,
And
endometritis,
this,
yes, are like so hard to get diagnosed with as well. And so it's just if we like actually spoke about these things there might be so much more clarity, but I feel like the way that I've learned about them has always been through like communal sharing and like a
Hmm.
friend being like, oh yeah, that happens to me too, and this is what I have, and like this is what I've used to try to counteract that.
Yeah, and the over exaggeration and like non-specificity around periods too was always a thing. It was like the worst thing that could happen. You enjoy your life before, because once it happens your life's over, which is like not specific to like a 14-year-old or whatever, it's,
Yeah.
oh, what I'm sorry, explain what you mean, like my life is over. What do you mean it, like what do you mean every month? It's not specific enough to like either reassure you or inform you at all. Like when you say
Hmm.
period pain is you feel like you're dying, what does that mean? Does it mean like a part of your body hurts, that it's normal for it to hurt and this happens to other people? Because when you're a kid you just think, oh my god, I'm the only one who feels this way. Like it's, I don't know, I think it's very interesting how we kind of just like to blur it into this like realm of, oh, that's other things that you feel, rather than, no, it's just like any other pain you would feel in your body. There's a reason for it and we should talk about it.
yeah, speaking about like period pains, I did learn in my, like talking with my gyno, and I was like, oh wait, periods aren't supposed to hurt. You can only diagnose endometriosis surgically. So they have to go in because it's specific tissue. And like when I was talking with her, again, I think it's like you have to find a good doctor, and that's not accessible. It's really hard to do. But like she was talking about how there are ways to essentially be like, yeah, you probably have it, but they can't like officially diagnose you unless you do it surgically, which kind of sucks.
Right. What does that mean for people who don't have the insurance to get it surgically diagnosed? Or
Yeah.
I don't know, have like other like fear, like very valid like reasons that they don't want to engage with surgery or with like medical doctors, especially like when it is relating to like your genitals, which can be like really triggering for a lot of people.
Agreed. That's like pretty invasive, and I don't think that we talk enough about how invasive something like a pap smear or just like in a look at like our internal genitalia can be for us.
Yeah, literally just like annual visits to the gynecologist, especially for people who have trauma associated with their genitals, can be like incredibly triggering and really scary. And I feel like most gynecological staff that I've interacted with and my friends have interacted with are not well trained or prepared to engage with that. Like I can name like multiple people that I'm close to who have had like really intense panic attacks at the gynecologist during like their annual exam because those triggers have come up and doctors have dealt with that just so incredibly poorly. And this is something that like so many people are experiencing. So like, why are we not better prepared to engage with it? But it starts with talking about it more. So yay.
And I think to that point too, well, we'll be talking about like resources for finding more gender affirming care, but that's getting to the point too of what happens when we talk about periods in a really specific way and how it can literally stop certain people from accessing it, specifically trans people and gender nonconforming people, when we always associate it with like womanhood or being a woman and stuff like that. Like people can't access like healthcare, and that's like very serious. So I think it's just very much all connected as well.
Yeah, just like moving our language away from like feminine products or like talking about periods, you know, women, something that women deal with, or like that time of the month, and just, you know, saying like menstrual products or period products or like people who get periods, you know, just like people centered language instead of this weird like femininity associated with it.
And even if you don't want to use people centered language, using like, this is what a menstrual cup is for, like you could completely just take any like person out of it, or the person who's using the product, which I think people centered language is still fine, but I just think there's a lot of different ways if you want to change it.
Well, I think too, even down to like packaging. Like I'm thinking of like You by Kotex, which is all these like bright, what we traditionally associate with like feminine colors too, because everything's down to marketing. But just like this idea that we have to make it so pretty and exciting, and it's so fun.
Yeah. And like thinking about period products, like the idea that like for people who are not using menstrual cups, because there are a lot of reasons that people might not want to use a menstrual cup, like buying pads and tampons every month is like expensive as fuck. And like the fact that this is not like something that is subsidized by the government in any way, even though this is something that's going to happen to a lot of different people every month, 12 months out of the year. And like a pack of tampons ranges anywhere between like $10 to $15 if you want to get some good organic ones, and that's gonna last you maybe one cycle. So like, why am I paying money to have my period?
And all like free or like subsidized period products are only ever in women's rooms.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We like have all these initiatives that are like to make like period products accessible, and we're still like very much sequestering it by what we're perceiving as who gets a period.
Yeah. We also wanted to talk about how like engaging with your period can be a positive thing. There are a lot of people who get periods who like are able to reconnect with their bodies through periods and do like rituals related to getting their period, or who will use period blood to do like certain like magic spells and like bodily, or who just can feel in touch with their body by inducing periods with like teas or related to the moon cycle. And so thinking about how like that can exist, and if you want to try to engage with your period like that, like we challenge you to do so, but also like reflecting on the fact that not everyone wants to like make their period positive or have to reclaim their period, and like it can also just suck. So I think we want to talk about menstruation in Judaism specifically because of course we're doing this fun little fucking the fine print making mentions collab, and so I can give a quick overview, and Jesse, if you want to jump in, let me know. Basically in Judaism, so like in the Torah, the like menstruation is like sort of considered impure, and it's also like the language around it is of course very gendered, very heteronormative, and very cisgender. But nida is like this idea of impurity and sin, and so when a person gets their period, it's part of the nida experience. Like you are impure and you are like sinful during the time that you have your period. And so the root of that word actually comes from like departing, fleeing, wandering, which is nadad, but people have sort of come to understand it as separate. And so like in the Torah, like the idea is that when someone gets their period, they're saying that it is a woman, that they are supposed to be separated from the community, and that their sexual relations are not supposed to happen between a man and a woman during that time, and that a lot of men and women don't even really understand like nida and what happens around menstruation until they're married or they're like in a union with each other. And so in order to sort of like address this impurity or sin that like people associated with periods, that was where the mikveh came in. And the mikveh, like in the Torah and in like biblical times, the mikveh was used as a place to cleanse yourself of that sin and impurity, and re-enter the community now clean out of your like nida period. And so that is my understanding of the Torah biblical side of things. Do you have anything to add in there, Jesse?
Yeah, just quickly, the pre-temple, like pre being in the land of Israel, you know, Torah time, there's no specification of like where women should go. It's just be elsewhere, be out. And what's funny is what brings me back to what you and Kayla, and I think we're talking about before, with there not being much time when you're not in a cycle. Like you're supposed to be out of the camp or whatever, away from people for the time of your period, but then also 10 days after so that you can be pure again. So some people's periods may last like 20 days and then you're gone for another 10 days and then it happens again the next month. That's crazy. And people are in the Torah time, you know, which like how sure are we that this has actually happened, but they have to take their children with them because they're the women, they're in charge of the household. So every month they're packing up and moving their family basically out of the camps so that the person who doesn't menstruate in their house can feel like safe and secure. Anyway, made me think about today as we're talking about all of these kind of hoops that people who menstruate have to jump through to get the care and things that they need, but also then to economically survive. There would have been no way to be employed as a person who menstruates back in that time because you have to be away from the community for your whole time, basically. So that was all I was going to add.
Imagine paying rent for a place that you're not even at. For like, I'm thinking about it today. I'm like, I'd be pissed. You're telling me I have to leave, so like paying to live here and this other place.
Yeah. So just like thinking about the ways that obviously that changed over time, but like how that framed a very like negative view of menstruation. I did see something really interesting though, because like obviously there are more religious sects of Judaism, like Orthodox folks who like do still practice some of these ideas around menstruation, at least, you know, maybe not engaging in sex with their partner and visiting the mikveh, maybe not like a full separation from the community. But I thought it was interesting because I saw an article that's going to be included in our resource list that said like this, it says, quote, a lot of this might feel like self-imposed celibacy. Many Orthodox people view this time as an opportunity to connect with their partner in a more emotional and spiritual way, while they're forbidden from making physical contact. And while, you know, in part that's sort of like, you know, these words forbidden from physical contact and like self-imposed celibacy, I thought that framing like really goes back to what we were talking about in our last session around how like celibacy, even like when you're in a partnership, can be like really special and can be an opportunity to connect on these different levels. It doesn't have to be framed as this, oh, you're not having sex with your partner. So I thought that framing was actually really interesting. And I was like, that's kind of cool that like for this period of time throughout the month, you know, married Orthodox couples, like some who are choosing to engage with it this way, might be taking that time to connect on a different level while they're not connecting physically. So I thought that was really cool, actually.
I also feel like to the point of obviously someone shouldn't tell you where to be like during your period or how you should feel and things like that, or like how it's going to impact your life. But I do feel like when I got my period, there was an expectation based off the type of person that my mom is, but I'm guessing how like other people are too, like teaching young people about like how to interact with their periods, like nothing's going to change. Like, you have to still get through the day. And like, I don't think that you should complain because you're going to get it every month, and all this other type of thing about how I had to just deal with the fact that like I was uncomfortable and go about my daily life like I wasn't having my period, and something that's kind of a big change physically to my biological everyday and stuff like that. And yeah, so I think that just like I can appreciate, or I wish that I had more moments during that time of like rest and relaxation and things like that.
Yeah, because like your body is like literally forcing you to slow down, but within capitalism, like those tropes of, well, you just have to keep going, like it's gonna happen every month, so you just have to make it work is so common. But like I'm thinking about, especially for people who like their period pain is so debilitating that that is not a reality, and like they like have to use sick days or take time off of work every month because like they literally functioning. Yeah, that is just like, what does that mean, and how can we reframe and normalize like that being the case for people and not penalizing people for having like literally having to rest. But thinking about the mikveh, so obviously like historically mikvahs were used around like this impurity. However, and Jesse and I have a whole session on the mikveh on our Making Mentions page, so I'm not going to go too hard into mikveh stuff because I would just be repeating myself. But there have been a lot of like reframings of the mikveh, you know, within the last few decades, century, whatever, and thinking about how now the mikveh is not just used for menstruation and used to purify, but like some people might use it for menstruation in like really positive ways, like that helps them mark their cycle and it's a ritual. Or how the mikveh like is used by like trans folks and is used by folks who are going through really big life changes, and there are a lot of like rituals that have been created to sort of honor different life changes or like different reasons people might be in the mikveh, or the mikveh has been reformatted in ways that can really like accommodate, you know, different types of abilities and like different bodies, different gender identities. And so this reclamation of something that was like sort of like seen in a negative light to now be something really powerful and like a really beautiful ritual. And so two things that I wanted to highlight mainly around that were just like the idea that a mikveh, like the main requirement for a mikveh at the end of the day is that it is made of natural water. And so like if someone wants to go to a mikveh but isn't comfortable like being in a space of other people or being naked around a stranger and can't find an accessible mikveh, like any natural body of water can be a mikveh, and there are plenty of like rituals you can access online. And just moving away from this idea of purification, like in one of the articles about trans Jews finding a place in the mikveh, they wrote like for a trans Jews choosing mikveh, the act isn't about purification. Instead, it's a method for healing or cleansing the queer trans body from the toxicity of hetero and cisnormativity. And I thought that was really beautiful and like just a really beautiful reframing. So in thinking about like how, you know, periods have historically been deemed taboo and impure, this is a good transition for us to talk about period sex. Yay.
Oh, right. Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits to period sex. Some things are, I mean, again, also, all of these things are like, if it's your choice. Like, I personally am someone that just isn't about period sex that much, and that's okay. Like, you do you. But it's, yeah. So, there we go. First is like a discussion you want to talk with your partner. But some things that can help they help relieve cramps. Orgasming can help with your uterus because it's just a muscle contraction, and that's a lot of the times what happens during your period. There's like a natural lubrication for penetrative vaginal sex. Some people have an increased sex drive. Some people use it as a new form of intimacy and to feel close with their partners. And oral sex is also possible, which is something that I didn't really think about, but that's also something that is possible during your period. And then some tips that I have come across are one, remove a feminine product before, or feminine. I just read it off the thing.
That happens to me all
All
the
right,
time with my notes,
remove
and
a
I'm like,
menstrual
that
product.
I copy and paste something that was kind of fucked up. But continue, sorry.
No, I was like, wow, that really just rolled right off the tongue, but it's that ingrained. So removing any menstrual products like a cup or a tampon, which like sounds obvious, but also I feel like at least everyone I know has kind of had a scare sometimes. Ooh, maybe I haven't.
Yeah.
Another way is to lay a towel down, specifically a dark color towel or one you don't care about, or using sheets that you don't like. Again, using birth control, big tip. As well as like you still want to protect against any potential STI transmissions. And then if you're like really worried, period sex in the shower is also good, but slippery. I know Mad has a couple other ones too.
I don't was that your last one too? Because then I could
I think
add
so.
to the
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, mine are from Bustle. So if some of them seem not real or not applicable, include them in your life in the way that you want. But yeah, I did read that like period sex in the shower, totally you can do it, but it's more slippery because of the blood. And another one was, oh, considering which positions might make sense, or what positions might have like more blood come out because of gravity. So being on top versus like laying down or something like that. What was another one? I also was reading. Oh no, what were we gonna say?
I was gonna say, relating to positions, I've heard that missionaries often, and to avoid like positions like doggy, where it's like a harder or deeper like penetration level.
That's true. That's true.
And
Okay.
just like with pain and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never thought about that, but yeah, I do feel like my cervix is shorter or something during my period. So having penetrative sex, like I definitely don't feel like I have as much. It doesn't elongate in the same. But the other one was just to your point about using protection. Blood can be like a medium for bacteria just during that time, so it makes it easier for bacteria to spread to cervix and vagina. I think that's it.
Yeah, I just think that talking about all of this can really help to normalize what's going on and what feels good. And not only talking to your partner, but just, I don't know, I feel like something that just was helpful in my general, like, education about my body and about sex in general has been like having like friends that I feel comfortable talking about this with, that like we're exploring it together, and it's like, oh, like that's what you do, okay, that's interesting, or that's, I guess it's not like weird, and just like removing the weird taboos from it. I also think that's something that I have to work on, is also like reflecting on the fact that it's okay if people don't want to have period sex. That's not a reflection of the kind of sex that they're engaging in, because I definitely feel like, and I'm admitting this right now, like I definitely feel like I've shamed specifically people with penises who are like, ew, I don't want to have period sex, that's gross. And some of that is, okay, well, why do you think that? But it's okay for people to not want to be engaging with blood. It's not like a substance that we engage with a lot. It's like coming out of our bodies, and like some people just simply might not want to be engaging with that, and that is okay. I think if we can talk about that's coming from a weird like masculinity place where it's like viewing periods as like unclean. But if someone is just simply like uncomfortable with that, like it is like, that's not something to shame people around. Like not having period sex and having period sex are like both super cool and okay. Again, as long as you're like engaging in it safely and in ways that feel good for both parties or all parties.
Yeah,
And I'm
you're
glad.
making me. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
No.
Oh,
I was just thinking about our conversation last time about how religion isn't inherently puritanical, and like how it, like this idea, but going back to even the mikveh being like a liberation practice for some people, and like the idea that religion can be interpreted in a lot of different ways is really interesting, how it's kind of pervaded into the social norms of like purity and cleanliness, because there are a lot of things that people do that are gross, like actually unhealthy, but we don't consider them like dirty the way we do with like periods. And also to think of like, how come this never came up in any sort of like sex education or health class? Like we would have been mortified to raise our hand and ask a health teacher, okay, but what about having sex on your period? Oh my God, I can imagine being a teacher too. The class would just go crazy. And that's like so upsetting because we're acting like kids aren't doing it, right? And so instead, we're kind of letting these harmful messages like, ew, your period is gross, be the norm, because we're not addressing it in the classroom or in any formal way. Like we said, the places we're hearing about it is from our friends, which is cool if your friends are like informed, doing their own research, but otherwise can be really harmful, especially for teenagers, you know? So
yeah, I think that's a really good point. I was like reflecting on that, and I'm like, I definitely, the more productive versions of those conversations have mostly been with like people when I was over the age of 18, and also was like a gender and sexuality studies major talking to my other gender and sexuality studies major friends. And so like the type of information that we had access to and like the framing that we had is sort of self-selecting and specific. Also reflecting on what you said, Jesse, I'm just thinking about like how much more we could normalize things if we just stopped separating kids by binary genders in health classes when we're talking about things. Like, I'm assuming that's still common practice, but like when they like separated the boys and the girls to talk about like sex or pregnancy or menstruation, when it's like both groups of people should be learning about all of these topics because it impacts everyone regardless. And again, that also fully doesn't account for like children who are trans or non-binary, but like even beyond that, like if you are like a cis woman or a cis man, like everyone needs that information because that just further contributes to these like stereotypes and like taboos around like periods being secretive or dirty or like pregnancy being something that like cis women have to deal with. So.
And it's like doing that to makes your body like your shame, like you're like something that you have to hide from like the other person or the other group and something like that too.
I feel like we hit our marks. I feel like we might have actually attained a reasonably timed session.
Wow.
What do we think? Any final reflections?
I don't think so.
We will have some incredible resources posted sometime this weekend, a whole bunch of them about menstruation, mikveh, period sex, like menstrual products, whole 9 yards. So keep your eyes peeled for those. And our next session is talking about abortion and Judaism. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.